Am I going to have to say something? I don't have any food. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be continuing on with the Tai Chi Yang Style 108 form, and we're going to be going through primarily single whip. In the previous video, we went through the opening posture, step out to left ward off, and grasp the sparrow's tail. Now we're going to move into single whip. I'm also going to show raise hands and shoulder strike following that, but I'm going to focus in on single whip because I believe it is one of the most important movements that I can show you that'll help you understand the nature of what the Tai Chi Code is. Not single whip in itself, but the transitions out of single whip are very powerful in helping you understand the nature of the core movements. And in the Tai Chi Code, what I do is describe the specific core movements that create the 8 energies of Tai Chi, and nowhere is that more visible than in the transitions coming out of single whip. So you're going to get a lot out of this video, so stick around and I think you're going to enjoy it. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of the Tai Chi Code and the Walking Code. I think the important thing is that the Tai Chi Code and the Walking Code, both which describe how our core is used for proper fluid body movement, are the same code, just applied to different forms of movement. So if you're interested in improving your walking technique, your posture, your alignment, even if you're not totally interested in Tai Chi, you're still going to get a lot out of this instruction. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I just need a little of the space here. So we just... If you're interested in any of the instruction of the core movements from the opening posture through the end of grasp the sparrow's tail, that will be available in the previous video, which is linked above, or the full version on the website, which will be linked in the description section. So I'm going to begin here where we left off at the end of grasp the sparrow's tail with push. We're going to begin the transition to single whip by sinking back and dropping the palms to a parallel position with the arms parallel to the ground. Once we've sunk the weight all the way back onto the rear foot, now we're going to pivot and we're going to turn the right foot around, pivoting on the heel approximately 135 degrees, so we can end up with a 45-degree angle of the rear foot as we move into single whip. Then we're going to shift back to the right leg, and as we shift back, we're going to begin forming a crane's beak with the right hand, and the left hand is going to begin to rotate up at a slight angle. So that's the first part of the transition. And then we step into empty stance. As we step into empty stance, the left knee is going to float out into a position angled in the direction we plan to be going. And the right hand and left hand are going to begin to circle back towards the right. Then we're going to do a pluck movement, pushing the right crane's beak out, or I should say a plucking movement, because that's what this is. Then we're going to step out onto the left heel, and then we're going to shift the weight, and I'll explain the core movements in a minute. And after shifting the weight, we're going to complete the movement by extending the right hip, finishing off single whip. Then we're going to move into raise hands and shoulder strike, first by pivoting back to the right leg and opening both palms wide. The left foot is going to rotate in on the heel, so it's going to be angled out at 45 degrees that way. And then in one movement, I'm going to shift all of the weight over the left leg, freeing up the right leg into empty stance. And then we're going to place the heel down in a movement that is similar to play the fiddle. Then we're going to do a very small rollback movement, go into empty stance with a vertical carry the ball position. And then I'm going to rotate the body to step out onto the right heel. I'm going to push forward. And at the end of the push, I'm going to rotate the body, creating a shoulder strike. And then that is the end of the movement. Now let's look at the core movements. And following that, we're going to look at transitions coming out of single whip. And you'll be able to see how changing one or more elements of the core movement change the nature of the transition. So first, the core movements coming out of Grasp the Sparrow's Tail. When we finish Grasp the Sparrow's Tail, we are in a push. I'm extending my left hip from the glutes. I am turning my upper waist forward on the left, the same side as the glute action. That is projecting the left arm forward, and I am turning the lower abs back to the left and tucking on the left, so the lower abs are active on the left. So each of the three elements of the core, upper waist, lower waist, and hips, are active on the left during this push. Now we're going to sink back onto the left leg, and this is going to continue the core waist movements on the left, but the power is going to be coming from the right hip. I'm going to flex the right hip as I continue turning the upper waist and lower waist the same way they just were, and that's going to allow the body to sink back. Then I'm going to turn the upper waist to the left. The lower abs are already turning to the left. I'm going to turn the upper waist to the left at the same time I extend from the glutes of the right leg, and that energy is going to cause me to turn all the way around. Now I'm going to form the crane's beak. I'm going to extend from the left glutes, so pushing from the left glutes, continuing to turn the upper body waist towards the left. So I'm turning the upper waist against the extension of the hip. And then at the same time, I'm going to turn the lower waist to the right. So I'm placing the root on the right. As I turned around, the root is on the left. Now I'm going to turn the root back to the right, left to right, as I continue the upper waist turning to the left. When we turn the upper waist against the extension from the hip and lower abs in the opposite way, we're going to force the folding of the hand into that crane's beak. So that's what this motion is. Coming from here, I'm extending the left hip, turning the upper waist towards the left and the belly button towards the right. Then we complete going into empty stance by flexing the left hip and then turning the upper waist back to the right, forming the empty stance. So in this position, I have the upper and lower waist turning to the right, and I have flexion of my left hip. Now I'm going to do another pluck action. So pluck in the Tai Chi Code is described as extension of the active hip, turn the upper waist towards the active hip, lower waist away from the active hip. So as I do that, that's going to cause a projection of the crane's beak out. Pluck is the same action if we were doing kickboxing that would create a jab. So that would be the same core action that we're doing here, just from a different starting position. Now we're going to step out. This is the same core energy that we use to step out in Parting the Wild Horse's mane. Stepping out onto the left heel in a shoulder width stance. Now we're going to shift the weight forward and drop the foot to the flat position. Arms are not doing any movement at that time. You'll notice the palm is still facing my head as I do the shift. This shift is powered by flexion of my right hip. And the upper waist is turning to the right, lower abs are turning to the left, rooting the left leg. So this in the Tai Chi Code is the movement of split. That is what that energy is. Shifting like this. It's the same shift starting from this position that we would have used in Parting the Wild Horse's mane. But coming from this position, that is what it looks like. And then we change split to pluck by taking the right hip flexion and turning it into right hip extension. So as I activate the glutes, that is what forces the palm out at the end of the shift. We go from here, right hip flexion, right hip extension. Now we're going to shift back and open the arms. This involves turning the upper and lower waist to the right as I flex my left hip. And in a minute, we're going to go through all of the different 8 transitions we can do off of this left hip energy, transitioning from single whip. So we've opened the palms up. I'm going to do that again. Upper and lower waist turn to the right, flexing the left hip. Now I'm going to completely reverse that and turn the upper and lower waist to the left as I flex the right hip. And that is what brings me into empty stance. And whenever we do this transition to raise hands and shoulder strike, that is what's going to be going on. Upper and lower waist are turning to the right, and then we're going to switch them completely to turning to the left, getting a full transition to empty stance in one motion. Then we're going to place our heel down, performing the movement that looks like play the fiddle. I'm not going to go through the core movements going into the shoulder strike because I want to now focus in on the transitions coming out of single whip so you can understand what's going on with the core movements.